Okay, can I take the opportunity to ask a question regarding how the Canadians consider Europeans in general? So this is on, let's say, the cultural basis. We know that you talk about they are very connected to the United States, there are very similarities. Is there any, I don't know, interest or in collaborating with the European companies? Is there any, I don't know how to call it, recognition of the quality of the product, or something like this? Any value that they are giving to the European services or companies?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to understand that all the Canadians, they want to go on vacation in Europe. and as I mentioned before, because of the strong immigration, almost all Canadians has a little part of them is from Europe. Okay. So typically for those reasons, they're pretty open to European, and they tend to appreciate European. Now, when it comes to product and service, they know that Europe is in advance on some subject. For example, and typically everything related to sustainability, they will consider that Europe is a little bit in advance on that subject. So sustainability being the product, but being managing consumption and so on and so on. So they will listen to it with quite an open ear, because one thing I have not mentioned yet, but the main factor to be able to come on to enter the Canadian market, it's true innovation. Canada is a very mature market. They have a lot of suppliers from Asia and from the US. So you understand that, in the US, the market is very mature, very advanced. In Asia, we have access to a lot of products that are commodities and are not very expensive. So what's the added value of European product? It's really a cheaper price. It's mainly innovation and being in advance on the subject of sustainability, or the subjects that are related to regulation constraints.
You mean sustainability? You mean, you mean sustainability that of course has to be confirmed. It's not only the words that I'm saying that I'm very sustainable green company, but I have backs covered because I have certifications, I have labels, I have.
Well, yeah. Actually, beyond that, I think what Canadians recognize is the fact that in Europe there is way more law and regulation.
Okay.
Okay, that are creating those constraints against, and I use sustainability as a very
okay, so we are used to comply with much more restrictive rules. So from the beginning, our products must be more, I don't know, circular, more sustainable, more okay.
Exactly, and more towards economy and efficiency and so on. And they also know that those different laws and regulations, they will eventually come to Canada at one point. So, first example that comes to mind, it's, for example, the animal well-being in agriculture, right? Canada is going in that direction, but they haven't implemented anything yet, when in Europe it's been implemented for 5 years at least already. So all the solution coming from Europe, they know that they're going to have to start looking at it seriously, because that same type of regulation and legislation is coming soon. So that's, I think, the way they look at it. It's what has been developed by European companies to meet all those very high demanding regulation standards that we have, that you have in Europe. Yeah, and I think that, that lead to innovation and so on. So I would say that's probably what that's how they see European as being a bit leaders in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so to go back to the presentation, the last bullet, as I had mentioned before, it's networking, networking, and networking. The same way in real estate, it's location, location, location. Business in Canada is networking, networking, networking. And what that means? It means that, you know, a lot of companies, they kind of forget a little bit. You know, we are a company, Spanish company. We've been in business for 50 years, and we're coming to Canada. And so we have all that know-how that we've developed. Yeah, but don't forget that you come to Canada and you're pretty much starting from zero. So don't expect people to know you, to recognize your product as it is, and so on. And that means, most importantly, that you have to redevelop all your network. So, you know, get known with the buyers, get known with the different partners, get your name out there, understand the environment, understand who are the players, understand who's your competition. So you have to start from scratch. And so you have to develop a strong network to be able to do that. And you have to come here, you have to be part of association, you have to get involved. and in Canada, sorry, people do networking event to network. I know sometimes in Europe, you go to an event and you're a bit shy about networking, right? Because you don't want to be seen as too opportunistic. But here in Canada, people, they go to a networking event, they're going to network, and they're going to come to you, shake your hand and say, hey, how are you? What are you doing? And if what you're doing is of no interest to them, they're just going to say bye right away. They're not going to be polite and say, oh, that sounds interesting. No. They say, oh, no, and they leave. So it's networking for networking. You know, I know in Europe a lot of, sorry. I'm not sure I'm still going to be alive on Thursday. In Europe, you know, the networking often is kind of an underground network, like where you have your network from school, network from people you know, families, and so on. Where here in Canada, it does exist a little bit with that type of network. But the truth is that people are just very good at networking, going to events, trade shows, association, meeting with people, and creating the network from scratch. And they have no problem with that. And that's what companies coming to Canada should replicate as well. Sorry. All right, go to market. Some question about what we just covered, or everybody's good?
Now, I think that we'll have some questions where we will start in the next weeks working on some potential missions. We'll come to you with some advice or maybe some recommendations on also on the events maybe that we should consider, like you mentioned trade events or other events for the sector industry that can be considered for our case.
Yeah. So go to market. Well, first of all, I think the big one is adapt. I use a word, I don't know if it's a word, I don't think it's a word, but I say Canadianize your offer, Canadianize who you are, meaning some very little details, but you need to adapt. So first of all, I think the most important one are the references. I'm taking my example before, a company from Spain, been in business for 50 years, working with you know, the main architects in Europe. And they come to Canada and they say, oh, we've done that building, we've worked with that architect. And the people in front of them, they say, never heard about that architect, never heard about that building. Where is that? Where is that building? Oh, it's in Portugal, you know, I've never heard about it. Okay. So your reference kind of fall flat if you're using, you know, too many of those references. So what you need to try to do is to You can't invent reference that you don't have, but you need to say, okay, let's say, I've done the Musée du Louvre in Paris, which is the equivalent of that museum, and they have the same type of architecture, and they have the same type of issue. So basically, it's to say, we have a reference in Europe in something that's very close from what you have in Canada, okay? But don't just take your reference and just throw it at them, like if they have to know, or they have to know who that person is, or have to know what that building is, or have to know whatever. You have to do way more work than that, meaning that you have to use that reference and put it in the Canadian context for them to understand what you're talking about. Okay. I don't know if I'm using lightning in greenhouse, for example, and you have lightning greenhouses in the south of Spain, where it's 30 degree plus all year long, and there is never a cloud passing above. And you're going to use that as a reference, saying, we do that, we have those super lights that you can use. Well, the guy who was in Quebec was 2 weeks of the year at 30 degrees plus and overcast the rest of the year, and the temperature going at minus 15 in the winter. That doesn't talk to him, right? It's not it's a reference for you, but it's not a reference that you can have applicable in Canada. So that's something you really have to keep in mind. Use reference that make sense for North America, that makes sense for Canada, and that they can translate into something that talk to them. Okay, so that's I really insist on that, because I've seen too many people taking their same presentation, just present it, same references, and the effect is not here. There's no wow effect, because people they can't identify themselves to that. Master standards, norm, and regulations. We've talked a little bit about it, but for sure you need, like, if you're going to have a business presentation, or you're going to make a answer to an offer to a tender, you need to make sure that whatever you're sending or you're presenting, you're not presenting something that's impossible in Canada for some regulation reason. So I don't know, see, for example, you're saying, oh, we've put all our cable through a river, and maybe in Canada you're not allowed to do that. Well, again, it's not the best reference for them. Simplify your offer. I mentioned it before, but really be straight to the point, answer to the needs that need to be addressed. Don't overdo it. It's a mature market, so very competitive on commodities. You really need to put all your speech and marketing effort on differentiation, innovation, what's different. Little details, but acculturate your offer. I mean, it's not much to change in a presentation your price from euro to Canadian dollars, to put your vocabulary adapted to the local market. For example, one of my clients yesterday told me, oh, they manufacture tents, and they told me, oh, we do those lodge. And I said, lodge? Oh, you're doing wood lodge? And said, no, it's just a tent that we put on a wooden platform. Oh, I say, well, you can't call that a lodge in Canada. A lodge in Canada, it's a structure made of wood that's used typically for hotelry. You cannot use that word. So just all those little details, but that shows the people you're talking to, the people you're presenting to, that you've done your homework, that they understand, that there's no misconception, that they understand what you're talking about. So it doesn't seem much, but all those little things, when they add, it can make your offer attractive or not attractive at all. Innovation, I've cover it again, but I mean that's how you get into that market. Understand the geographic segmentation, the West, Central, so I called it the Prairie before, East territories. I don't think it's a good idea to try to tackle all the provinces at once. I think you should start with typically where your market is. And in some instances, it can be in different provinces, but in most cases, there is a big potential in Quebec and Ontario. But start there, make sure you understand how the market is organized, and then start deploying towards the west of Canada. Again, you go to Vancouver, you had a 3 hours time difference. You have access to people, you're dealing with people that are much more turned toward Asia and the US, way less towards Europe. So all those little things make, you have to understand that also when you look at distribution, don't have the ambition to find a distributor that's going to cover all Canada. It rarely exists, or there's not many distributors that are able to do it well all across Canada. You need to focus on, where those people are good at. Government will, we've highly talked about it, and typology, rural versus urban, where you have some specificity, obviously. There was a question.
Can I ask one issue? Sometimes in Europe, the companies to showcase the other, that's how to say, to prove that their product or service is better than others, they include in the presentations a sort of comparison of the main competitors, showing how the product differentiate from others, from the same, let's say, typology of products, how it differentiate in positive, it is what they're doing better, what is more, if it's more economic or if it's more innovative or whatever. Do you think comparing this, using this kind of comparisons with the companies that maybe are Canadian companies, or that are known by Canadians or Americans or others, might be positively, let's say, taken, or it can be a risk? In terms that if I'm benchmarking my product, my company, and I'm a European company with the Canadians, for example, from the same sector offering similar products, do I do something that can be, let's say, understood as, okay, I have clear information I get, or I'm not, you are in some way saying that our Canadian products are not good enough? I don't know. This is something that...
Yeah. So three level of answer to that. The first one is, don't oversell your product in Canada. Okay, that's not very accepted. If you oversell people, and people will notice, and they will not appreciate that. So that's number one, don't oversell. Number two, if you start comparing with a North American competitor, you better make sure you exactly know what those people are doing, because if you compare with your local competitor and you see them every day, and you have their product in your facilities that you've dismantled to look how they made and how they service it, maybe you can do it, but before you do that, just make sure you fully understand what they do. You can be exposed to some US or Canadian product in Europe, and you feel like, oh, I know what they're doing, but maybe what they offer in North America is a little bit different. Yeah. So before you compare yourself, make sure you really understand. And the third point that you've addressed, and you've kind of answered it already, nobody likes being told that what they've been using or doing the past 10 years is crap, right? So that you also have to be very careful with that, especially in the Canadian mentality. So I mean, if you master what the other people are doing, comparing, it's part of the culture here. People will do it. They will have no issue comparing. If you, for example, compare some features, and you can compare it with a very specific model. So rather than saying that company, you say that model of that company, and make sure you understand what they do. But comparing is part of the culture. Just be careful that you understand what you're comparing, and just be careful that you don't kind of let people know that they've been using the wrong things those past 10 years. Nobody like that.
Thank you.
The distribution strategy, I've talked a little bit about it, but again, in terms of geography, except the very large distributors that have actual offices in all the different provinces and cities, it's usually quite segmented. It's typically quite segmented, and a lot of the company I work with will have the distributors that cover Quebec and the Maritimes, so Atlantic Canada, someone that covers basically Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and someone to cover the West. And there are different reasons to that. First of all, from one province to the next, the market can be very, very different. We talked about heritage before. The heritage in Quebec, it's pretty important. The heritage in Saskatchewan, not that much. So, you can find a distributor that will be very good at working with historic monuments in Quebec, but it's sorry, maybe a bit of a challenge to find someone with the same competency in Manitoba or Saskatchewan, for example. So you have to understand you have some, I'm sorry. I'm going to go get some more water, sorry.
Julian.
Antonella, you have a budget on extra aid for medications?
We have extra drugs.
Extra drugs, extra budget.
Yes.
We have a lighting sector on the HSC lighting post-COVID pandemic that kills all the germs and viruses. You can purchase a lamp.
But we are testing it, so it's quite dangerous at the moment.
I'd try anything right now. Yeah, sorry, I was saying about distribution. It's so from one province, from one region to the next can be very different. You rarely have people that are very good in all the provinces. So it's pretty common to have different distributor based on the geography. And it actually relates to what I mentioned before, the importance of networking. If I've developed a distribution company in Quebec to distribution some lights with a different municipality in Quebec, my network in Vancouver is probably about 0, right? So you don't want to use a distributor that you met in Quebec to distribute your product in Vancouver, because he probably doesn't know as well as the people in Vancouver. He probably doesn't have the same contact with the municipality. So that is very important to always have in mind. And I guess, to some extent, it's it's same thing in northern and south of Italy, for example. You probably don't have the same network and the same connections. But at the size and at the scale of Canada, it makes it even more important, and that's where you often find the needs to segment your distribution. So reference, I've talked about it, but to go a bit further for that, I want to stress the importance of the first reference and what needs to be done, because once you have a lot of things will start from that first reference, and so you need to be ready for that first reference to make some concessions, to maybe have a more attractive price, to give some different guarantees, to co-invest in the project, whatever needs to be done. But once you have the first reference in Canada, everything is much easier after that. So that's what we do with a lot of our clients, is that we do work with them until we reach that first reference, and then we build on that first reference. You build in terms of marketing, you build also internally in terms of finding what are the struggles and what are the difficulties, and make your offer better all the time. So first reference, go get it, because once you have it, everything is easier. And again, it's not it's really not just about selling your product or your service. It's about being able to service it after that, maintain, do whatever you have for your offer to stay in the time. I had just put a few information about the so sorry, before I jump to the next one, any question on that go-to market?
No, for now, no.
Okay. So I just wanted to give you a very quick overview. It's just a couple of slides on construction sector in Canada. So it's not dedicated only to Lightning, but I guess Lightning can enter all the different phases. But it's a very dynamic sector. I just wanted to share a few information with you. So as I mentioned before, first of all, keep in mind that 80%, I think it's 82% of the population is urbanized in Canada. So the importance of the large cities and all the infrastructure going with it. Booming industry in Calgary, Edmonton, Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. I don't know why Toronto is not here, but Toronto as well. In 2022, and I don't know if you know that index, but there is an index that counts the number of cranes that are in the city. So in the GTA, and the GTA again, it's the Greater Toronto area, so Toronto and its suburb, we have 152 cranes in the GTA, which make it the #1 in North America for high-rise building. So it's ahead of New York, Chicago, LA, all those big cities that you can think about. That's where the construction is happening right now in North America. And I think we are in second or third position in the world, behind a couple of Asian cities. So, I mean, huge dynamic around the construction business in Canada, and especially around those cities, and Toronto being the main one. Again, the different level of government have a direct impact on construction, and especially on the construction code. So all the codes are at one point defined at the federal level, but then all the provinces have the ability to change the code to adapt it to their needs, or to adapt it to what they think is best. So there is a national code, but that national code is actually very rarely used, because it's a provincial code that has a preference. And then within the provincial code, some municipalities even have some different bylaws of their own code for some often historic reason. But so the construction code, it's not one only unique across Canada. It can be different from not only one province to the next, but one city to the next. Massive industry, 1.4 million employees. It's about 7% of the Canadian workforce. And again, it's growing super fast. It's plus 50% compared to what it was 10 years ago. And what we see is that the population of Canada is going to keep growing. We believe at a pretty strong rate, and therefore the need for construction and infrastructure is here to stay. And you have to understand that we have some serious issue with the lodging to do in Canada, where in big cities people have a very difficult time to find an apartment to stay, and so there is a need for construction, but we can't build fast enough. Just a couple of links here. There is an association called the Canadian Construction Association and a magazine, constructioncanada.net, that are interesting and have quite a number of information. Again, the construction and the infrastructure can be at the three levels of government. If we go back to the tender process, if the post office needs a new building, it's going to be a tender from the federal government, because Post Canada is a crown corporation. If it's a new hospital, it's going to be a tender through the provincial government. And if you need some new light in the street, it's going to be through a municipal tender. So again, the construction is divided, and you need, I think Alberto was mentioning that before, that's a bit of the challenge, because you can find construction projects in all those different levels of government.
One issue regarding the municipalities and their investments in lighting or in construction, that can include also some lighting lots, sublots. We have seen that there are some lighting strategies, or some cities develop some lighting plans or smart city strategies that includes also some chapters on the lighting, in particular in this case on the public street lighting. I don't know if you have any knowledge if this kind of strategies are then, let's say, executed through some specific investments, maybe also from public procurement, but maybe also from some direct contracting. So how much these strategies that are, let's say, developed by the cities are then put in practice through the public procurement? So if maybe we can find, if they are publicly available, some lighting, I don't know, the lighting strategy of Ottawa, we can follow or understand what is the idea behind, and maybe have a more information on the potential or upcoming investments in this field.
But what do you mean by strategy? You mean a regulation, or?
No, it's not the regulation from, let's say, the technical point of view. It's more like the vision. When we were as a partnership making some, let's say, open source researches on the public procurement and procuring of lighting, we have found some documents like the smart city strategy or smart lighting plan of some municipalities, usually the big cities, so like Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, whatever. that it was like more like a vision of the city, of the governors of the city for the lighting from now until 2030 or whatever. So I don't know if you have knowledge if this kind of plans or strategies are staying on the vision level. So something that we share with the stakeholders and citizens, just, you know, to see that we have some idea what we will do in this context in the next 10 years. Or these strategies are seriously taken into consideration when developing the tenders on public lighting, for example?
I don't know. I don't know how the strategy are followed. That what I know is that, like, in every country we have politics, and you can have a strategy by the former team, and then they change mayor and they have a different strategy. So the implementation can be a bit challenging in that regard. Talking about smart cities, there was a number of smart city projects, especially one in Toronto, which was called Google Lab, I think, where all part of the city was supposed to be a smart city with sensors and everything everywhere. And the population went against it, and they had to withdraw that project. So I don't have an actual example top of my head of
because I have we have identified because they were publicly available. Don't die, Jan. Don't please stay with us another 15 minutes. We have identified, because maybe it was like, you know, open source, so it was shared on the municipality websites, the lighting strategies of the Ottawa. It's called like Capital Illumination Plan 2017-2027. And it includes a lot of details based also on details also from the very technical point of view. So how many lighting points Ottawa has or manages. So this is, you know, very important information for the potential suppliers also to evaluate the capacity to offer services for such a huge city. Similarly, we found also the lighting, how it's called, like best practices for effective lighting, a guideline from the Toronto and the Toronto Green Standard that focus on, for example, on the light pollution and give some specific indications by the Toronto Municipal Codes how to manage the street lighting and the tenders in consideration to the dark sky protection laws or requirements. And the same we have found also for the Vancouver area, that is like the outdoor lighting strategy. And all these strategies, these three that we have found out, were developed based on very wide networking, collection of inputs, feedbacks from the stakeholders, so both citizens, but also some private, I don't know, commercials, whatever, and provide important information on the number of lighting fixtures, on the including also some specific indications, all the how to say, technical requirements that specific lighting must have for the specific city area. So we were wondering if these documents that are officially prepared and, let's say, signed as the city documents, city strategies, are then also, let's say, baseline. Are there bases for the tenders managed by the cities or not? So if we can treat these documents as some kind of indication, what can we expect or what the city is expecting?
I honestly don't know how they implement the strategy and how it translates in tenders. I don't no clear answer for that. I guess we can challenge Jonathan on that tomorrow, even if it's Thursday. But yeah, I'll try to find out for maybe for November if
Great.
if
Yeah, just to, because you know, very often in Europe, maybe the big cities that have this huge strategy, smart city strategy, or smart lighting, inclusive strategy, and they are there on the paper, used during, let's say, the meetings with the citizens. And then when you're preparing the public procurement on this, they are using the materials from like 20 years ago, and this is all the same. So the question is here, because this will give a lot of information, you know, on the expectations, technical regulations, certifications, also the information that you mentioned at the beginning. So like the climate requirements. I also found this kind of information in this strategy. So we can consider this as a valid document supporting the tender. Or it's something that, okay, it's there, and the tender is one thing, the strategy is another.
Let me try to find out. Okay, I don't have the answer right now.
Great, thank you.
What's next? Those are just kind of numbers on the size of the permits and so on, but give you a good sense. I think it's interesting to know also that construction and building construction in Canada is not only driven by residential, but also a lot by commercial and industrial. And in the industrial sector, we are missing, especially in the Toronto area, we're missing a lot of building. There is a very high demand for building, especially for big space like warehousing space. So there is a lot of need for that. Transit, and I guess lighting, it's a big chunk of the industry, but transit is finally, I will say, there are some big investment, because today in Canada, everybody's using their car. The train, for example, its passenger represents something like only 5% of all the train traffic. 95% is for goods. But so at the municipal level, they're trying to develop a few interesting projects. So there is a GO expansion. GO is the name of the company in the Toronto area that does all the transit, so local train and bus. There is another one also in Ontario with REM and the LRT. The LRT is very close from my house. It's a light rail train. So there is a lot of transit, but especially about subway, light rail type of transit that are being developed at the moment in Canada. In terms of major construction projects, there is a big refurbishing project right now taking place in the nuclear industry with a big power plant being looking after, but that's maybe a bit less of an interest for So we just here to mention that we have two main issues in the construction sector. Number one, it's price of material. It's been going crazy since COVID. I mean, it's going to be soon cheaper to build your house out of gold than out of wood. It's insane. And the second very big issue is the shortage of human resource. And to conclude, I just had a couple of business case, which I want to go over very fast, but just to give you a little bit of a sense of what kind of challenge company can face when they look at a public tender. The first one, it's a manufacturer of escape ramps. Oh my God, escape ramps for subway tunnel. And so basically, you know, if the subway is stuck in a tunnel, you can get out of the subway, and you have those ramps that you can walk on and take you out. So the product is, there is some engineering. It's not overly complicated, but you need some engineering on those products. And so that engineering has been developed in Europe, and they wanted to actually manufacture the product in Canada because they were answering to a tender for one of the subway projects. But then they realized that they couldn't, first of all, find the equivalence in terms of steel. So they're using a very specific steel to make those ramps. But that name of steel is not the same in North America. And it's very difficult. It was very difficult for us to be able to make sure we were using the same steel with the same quality. And actually, we were never able to find the exact same quality. There is always some differences. So that's something to keep in mind, because if you answer to a tender and you answer the tender and you say, okay, we're going to have some local content, so we're going to do the engineering in Europe, but then we're going to do the actual manufacturing of the product in Canada, that's a challenge we can face. Am I able to find the exact same type of material equipment, and what am I offering? Is it available here in Canada? The other thing is, for that same project, to find the same thickness, or how we call it, the gauge. So Canada is in the metric system. This being said, in the construction world, everything is in inch and feet, because a lot of the products are coming from the US, which is in the imperial system. So, you know, you're going to come to Canada, and you're going to have to answer to the tender in metric. But then in terms of application where people are installing, if you tell them I have 10 meters of cables, they're going to say 10 meters of cable, what's that? You have to tell them it's 30 feet. If you tell them it's 30 feet right away, they will know. If you tell them it's 10 meters, it's going to be, I mean, I'm using an easy example here, but just that in the construction industry, for historical reason and because of the proximity with the US, in the everyday operation, everything is in inch and feet. And it does create some, you know, it's not major, but it does create some difficulties. You know, I'm talking about the gauge, for example. Well, here, the manufacturing plants, they will do something that's 1/8 or 1/4, when in Europe you do something that's 2 or 3 millimeters. But 1/4 is not exactly 3 millimeters. So you cannot find the exact same thickness of your product, for example. So it does create some little difficulties. Manufacturer of racking system for solar farm, I talked about it, same type of issue. But in that case, the building structures, because the buildings are built differently, the building structures, they couldn't use the same calculation, and they had to redo some calculation to make sure that the additional weight they were adding on the roof will not make the building collapse. We've talked about this one as well. But the electronic component, make sure it's -40 plus 40 type of thing. I had a discussion not long ago with someone who told me that to be able to go -40 in their equipment, they will need to have some military grade type of components, and that it was too expensive. And so they were not going to answer to a solicitation from a client. And the last one, it's a pretty good one. Company in France that does some lighting system for mainly for construction sites. And they've sent all the equipment with the plug at the French standard. So all the equipment gets there, and they cannot plug the plug in the outlet because it's not neither the right size, neither the right model. So they had to cut all the plug and change it and rewire everything to put some North American plugs. It seems pretty stupid like that, but it happens all the time, all the day. And, you know, that's things that you have to make sure you incorporate in your specs when you answer to a tender, and make sure that all those different elements, you understand them, you master them before you answer, and you're able to have a competitive offer. That's it for me for today. I'm pretty good. No, but
We really appreciate it.
Look at the time.
Yeah, you're perfect. You're perfect.
You're right.
Your
on time.
voice, you lost your voice, but you're perfect.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate, especially with your voice and your health condition, and we hope you get well really soon.
Thank you, Mary. So yeah, so next one is Thursday. I will let the people of Procurement Canada talk, but we'll challenge him on some questions. So I took a few notes here, but you will see he's very good. He knows the system very well. He understands all the different type of procurement. So again, I think that's the one to, if you only attend the one on Thursday.
Great. Thank you very much, Jan.
I don't know if we want to go around the table very quickly. Maybe if people have comments on what they were expecting today, if it was okay, if there's things that I totally missed that they'd like me to address next time, if we can go just around the table very quickly, because we have some other sessions, so I can always add some material.
We have some collected. We got some emails from some participants that had to left, so we will collect some inputs from them also. I don't know if there are any comments right now.
So we received so many information we have to think about, and think about the question that we can send you.
Yeah, because the questions that I was making also during the webinar was also some of them that we have collected, or that popped up during some joint researches that we made. So I think that for this first is a lot.
Okay.
So we will for sure have more very concrete practical questions with Jonathan when he will start showing us things. So
very well.
We will leave you to. We will let you relax and take some.
Okay, so if it's good for everybody, I wish you a nice evening, and we'll talk on Thursday again.
Yes.
Ciao, Jan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.